Good afternoon, Chris. Russell Broadbent, and great to have you with us today. Chris, I've spoken about you in the Parliament today, but I'd like you to tell us your story just as quickly as possible.
Sure, and thank you again for speaking in Parliament on my behalf and for other vaccine injured people. My story really quickly, I got injured by the vaccine, first dose back in 2021. I had the dose in July and was unwell by August, so it took about 3 weeks. After that, I was hospitalised 3 times, ultimately ending up paralysed. In March of 2022, I started working with a lawyer to submit a claim under the government vaccine claim scheme. It took us 11 months to pull together over 1,000 pages worth of documents to, I guess, adequately support the claim that I was making under the scheme. Since then, the government have had my claim now for 15 months. As of yesterday, it was 15 months. Initially, the scheme was explained to me by a representative of Services Australia as a 3-phase process. The initial phase being a review of your application to make sure that you did have a claim. Second phase being an external medical audit of your claim by the TGA. My claim passed that medical audit first go, which was explained to me. It was very unusual. Most people get asked for additional information, but past that stage first go. After that, the next stage is an external legal audit. And I was explained that was the third and final stage of the process. And once you get to that stage, Services Australia submit the documents to the external lawyers. They have 14 working days to review the claim and submit an advice back to Services Australia. I ultimately found out that's not truly the final phase. There was an internal legal review that took place after the external legal review. In any case, subsequent to the medical review, I've been asked for additional information 3 times. I've provided that on each occasion back to Services Australia. The most recent reply that I got from Services Australia after the second external legal review was, at this time, we can give no update.
Yeah.
And I asked for more information about what that actually means. And again, the response was, at this stage, we can give no further update. So no indication of what the external legal panel advised Services Australia after reviewing it for a second time. No indication of whether I need to provide any further information, and no indication of when Services Australia may be able to provide any further update.
What's your lawyer saying?
She's at the point, I guess, where she's throwing her hands up in the air somewhat. I'm not the only person that she's got on her books that's filed a claim under the vaccine claim scheme that now seem to be in a situation where we're in a black hole, where we're no longer getting updates or real information, meaningful information from Services Australia. And that's part of why I agreed today for you to use my name in Parliament and why I'm speaking to you again. Gloves have to come off now, Russell. I feel like I've got nothing further to lose. It's been, the last time I worked was in September of 2021. I haven't had an income since April of 2022. And I'm getting towards the end of my ability to cope, not just with the injury, which for me is a lifelong condition, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. I'll have that forever, and I'll have treatment for that forever. And that's been clearly explained to the government. But I'm in a situation now where the claim process just compounds the suffering that the illness alone provides for me.
And Chris, you've been speaking to other people in similar circumstances, haven't you?
Yeah, I know of multiple people, Russell, who've been through the process and have reached a point now where, again, they're just not getting any meaningful updates from Services Australia. It's like we've been put into a too hard basket, and they're hoping either that we go away or that we pass away.
That is a terrible indictment on Services Australia.
Just for them to say we can give no update at this time, it's almost like it's a word game for them.
If you were sitting with Bill Shorten now, who's the Minister for Services Australia, what would you say to him?
I'd say that your whole process needs a review. Firstly, the scheme was set up with criteria that are far too narrow. There's so many people who've been injured by these vaccines that can't even lodge a claim. The government dictated to us, the vaccine injured, what injuries we were allowed to claim for in connection with which vaccines. It should be enough that if your doctor and a specialist are saying you have a condition that is a vaccine injury from these COVID vaccines, that should be enough. The government shouldn't be telling the vaccine injured people what condition you have to have in relation to your vaccine. I had an AstraZeneca vaccine. I can claim for my condition under that. Had I received the same issue from a Pfizer vaccine, and I know people who have had CIDP as a response to the Pfizer vaccines, they can't claim.
Why is that, Chris?
Because the government set up criteria about which conditions you can claim for having had which vaccines. Under AstraZeneca, demyelinating conditions, which I have.
So you're saying to me the government actually know that the two different vaccines cause different injuries?
Oh, they'd have to have an awareness, but what they've done is limit the ability of people to claim under the scheme. As I said, it should be a matter for doctors to decide whether you've had a vaccine injury, not for the government to arbitrarily set out what injuries are related to which vaccinations.
Yeah. So where do you think you'll go from here, or is that's part of your appeal to me today?
That's a big part of my appeal to you today. And I made a correlation in the email that I sent to you about this situation and robo-debt. We know that there were suicides in relation to robo-debt. And where we're at now with this vaccine scheme, as I said, I haven't worked since April of 2022. I'm fortunate at the moment that I can get by, but it's getting close to a point where I won't be able to get by financially. That'll compound my situation. I know there's other vaccine injured people who can't work, who don't have perhaps the same level of safety network that I have, people whose relationships have broken down as a result of their vaccine injury. To have this cruel, callous scheme thrust upon you while you're sick, people will kill themselves, Russell, and that's not an exaggeration. That's where people will get to. I have this commentary with myself every day. What's going to happen? Am I going to get an outcome that will provide for a financial future with this scheme? Am I going to get something, in the middle? Or am I going to get nothing? If I get nothing, is that future going to be worth living? And that's something that this scheme makes you think through day after day after day.
I can understand the anguish. I can. Chris, thank you for being so honest and allowing your name to be used in the Parliament today. I can assure you that when I spoke, the parliamentarians in the room were listening very carefully to what I had to say, and I'm sure Bill Shorten would have read the whole speech by now.
Thank you. And it's not just down to Bill Shorten, but it's also Mark Butler.
Yeah.
Bill Shorten oversees Services Australia, but Mark Butler, his department own the policy, and that's part of where I'm facing challenges. I've been told by Services Australia that they've sent a letter into Mark Butler's office specific to my case asking for guidance. So you have two departments toing and froing to decide, I guess, who's responsible for giving an outcome. Someone needs to do something, Russell.
That's a very good note to finish on, Chris. Thanks. And
Thank you.
we'll be getting this broadcast out as soon as possible, so they'll have further things to think about.
I hope so. I really do.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Russell.
All the best.
And to you.